Hello, everybody. It's great for you to be here. Thank you for joining me and drawing with me. I really appreciate all those who come and draw with me. Remember, this channel is not about showcasing talents and abilities. It's about helping you to get some techniques and some styles of drawing that you can make your own, and eventually your own voice will come through, and you'll find your own niche in this art world. I'm so grateful for you to be here, though. Today we're going to be drawing with ink. I'm going to be using a Pigma Micron pen, a #2 pencil, and a kneaded eraser on just some good drawing paper. Today we'll be drawing from reference material, from scrap photograph, and just trying to find some textures and some values using ink line. So come along with me and let's do a little practicing. Figure out this thing called ink. Thanks for being here. I hope this is going to be educational and fun for you, as well as good practice. When we're doing ink, you want to start out with your #2 pencil and just do layout. Remember, everything you draw with that #2 pencil gets erased. So it's just there as a guide. So the first thing you do is you start out with your composition. You can say, well, gee, if I want that swan's body, I want some water in there, so maybe I'm going to leave a little bit of space for water, maybe a quarter of my sheet for water. So you can kind of come down and say, well, that's where I want the body of the swan to go. And maybe I want that neck to go up in here somewhere. And so all of a sudden, you've just established the body of the swan. And you can just go in there and just figure out where that goes. So there's the body. The neck's going to kind of come up in here. The head then would come up and around somewhere, about right up in there somewhere. It'd be about the head. And then just kind of connect it. There's the neck. And just give yourself a little bit of a guide. That tail is going to come over and touch that edge. Remember, a good composition touches or comes close to touching 3 of the 4 sides. There's his little beak. Beak is almost level with the front of it. Not quite, but almost. Kind of come in there, or her. I don't know. Is this a male or a female? Now, really, there's no reason to erase anything unless it's really bugging you and you think, I got to get rid of that. Because we're going to be doing ink with everything anyway. You can throw in just the basics of where things are, like the wing that's kind of tucked in back there. You throw that basic in. But the rest of it, it's not a big deal if it's slightly off. It's a good thing about doing animals, things that have really, there's not a lot of pressure here. Now, the important thing is, where does your eye go? Where's your emphasis area? And oftentimes it's the head. Sometimes we explore all the textures and everything, but your eye kind of wanders back up and kind of stays there in the head, especially that high contrast between the eye and the beak, that area there. So you want to make sure that that is fairly well done. And we'll even zoom into it, and we'll just make sure that that part is really well done. And again, we're going to do the water at the very last. But if you wanted to, just to, as you've got your pencil here and you think, well, I want to put in some of those ripples, those ellipses that are created by the ripples, by the water, you can throw a couple of those in just as guides. And you just kind of look at it. Remember that as things get farther away from you, they get closer together. So the little ripples that are getting farther away are going to be closer together, and those that get closer to you are going to be farther apart. And so just, little things like that you just kind of want to keep in mind. So once you got that all figured out, then let's go ahead and use our ink pen. I'm going to zoom into the picture, to the scrap. This is one thing that having scrap on a computer is very nice because you can zoom into it. So now what I'm going to do is that as I start to draw, I've got to remember that the surface of this swan, other than the beak and the head, this little part here, are fairly soft. And when you want to keep things soft, remember to leave them out. When in doubt, leave it out, okay? So I'm going to start out with the eye. Now, all I see is a big spot of darkness for the eye. So I may want to put that in there and just say, well, okay, I can see kind of where the eye goes. Just put a little round circle there, a little half moon. And more than likely, there's a highlight in there or a little shine in there. You can't have water and a white swan without having a little bit of highlight in there. So if I zoom into the eye, I'm going to just zoom into the head here really quick just to show you what I'm doing. And I'm just going to kind of go, well, okay, there's the eye. And I know that somewhere in that eye is going to have a little highlight. So if I put some little dots and dashes in there, and maybe towards the bottom have a little bit of a highlight. But it's not that bright, and so I'm going to hatch through it just a little bit, but I want to leave just a few little spots of light in there. Just a little bit. Give it a little bit of life. The rest of it is fairly dark, and if you wanted to, you could take your pencil and you can kind of tell yourself where that's all going, or you can just take your pen and hatch through it. So I'm just going to hatch through it like this, leaving those edges nice and soft. In other words, kind of broken. I don't want them too even because I want them kind of broken. I can always come back in and add more. I'm just hatching through that where the darkness is. I can always adjust this too. I can add more. Can't take anything away. But just look at the shape of that darkness. It's actually about 3 triangles put together. There's one there, one right there, and one down here that's really long and thin that goes out towards the beak. So if you just kind of section those off into those 3 triangles, yeah, you got it. Little dots and dashes. I'm just going to scribble through this little bit of darkness there. There's the beak. And the tip of the beak has a little bit of darkness just up on it, so I'm just going to round that up, the tip of the beak. But the top part of the beak is very, very light, so I may not even want to do much there at all. I can come in and just do a little dot or a little dash right there as it kind of moves its way down to the tip of the beak. Maybe put a little dot or dash right there, and that's it. You want to keep that line broken because that edge is so soft. On the bottom, there's this little triangle that's right under the beak, right there, goes into the beak. And a little bit of a darkness there, the tip of the beak. And you may want to put some hatched lines, just hatch through it really quick, just to say, well, it's kind of dark right in there. Or some dots. Maybe a couple little dots would be in order there. And now we just kind of hatch through it again. You say, well, okay, it's really dark over here. I can almost imagine that it's a little lighter right across that cheek, right there. And so I can hatch through that, maybe a little darker up in there. But now I'm going to use my line to smooth out some of that area that I had there. And again, you can use little dots, you can use little dashes. But it's just kind of scribbling. You're just kind of controlled scribbling through that. don't know if you ever want to go extremely dark. And then if you've got a little bit of gray, you can just kind of do these little hatched lines, or you can do little dots because it's so soft. So there's this little line here that comes off its beak. And I might just use some little hatch lines and then some dots just to say, well, that's kind of where that is. It's really light underneath. You've got reflected light off the neck coming back up on there. So you want that to be a little lighter too. And maybe just some little dots and dashes here and there to just create some of that texture. So that little fluff that's around its neck, those little soft feathers, you can create that with just little dots and dashes. Don't want to draw a line around anything, because if you do, then it becomes kind of a hard edge and kind of too hard. So what I want to do is just where this little soft edge is, I maybe want to put a few little dots and dashes, just a couple little areas up in there. And then it kind of raises up a little bit over the eyebrow. And put a little up in there. But again, keep it simple. Just a few little dots and dashes. Break those edges. Keep it soft. Where there's a little shadow, you can add a little bit more, but that's really about it for the edge. And if you got rid of that edge, which I always am so excited to get rid of the edge because I hate the graphite. The graphite just becomes muddy. So I'm going to try to get rid of as much graphite as I can. I'm just going to come through, hit that, get rid of all that graphite just in the head. And see how that just cleans it up, makes it a little nicer. Now, there's still some gray up around the eye where the shadows are, but again, you want to keep it nice and soft. And you know that that fur kind of flows out from the eye and down the neck. And so I'm just going to, as I do these little dashed lines, just going to kind of flow out, barely touch it with little dashes, dots. Just barely touch it. Little dashes and dots. And that's going to create the value that you need there. There's a little bit of shadow along the cheek over here. So just little dashes and dots. And you've got to learn to just barely touch your brush or your pen against the paper. Don't press down on it. And remember, when in doubt, leave it out. You might think to yourself, "Oh, that's too much." You can always add more later on. So just do the minimum amount right now, and then maybe come in and add some more. And all you need are little dots and dashes. Like I say, you can always come back in and add more later. This back part of the neck, maybe just a couple little dashes or a dot. That's plenty. And as it curves and comes around, there's more shadow under the neck, so you may want to add a little bit more dots and dashes there. Any place that's really light, just leave it out. So I can go through and add a little bit of line, little dots. Sometimes one little dot is all it takes to make that area a little grayer. Now I'm just going to go back into the area that I started to begin with. It's not as dark as I wanted it, so now I've got to darken it up. And I can use little dots and dashes in between just to darken it up. It also will smooth out that area. Dots are always a good way to create some smooth texture. So as I go through, I can tell how the lay of the fur is, or whatever that is, that fluff, that nap. And so I'm going to try to do little dots and dashes that kind of go along with that texture without being overdone. Keep it simple. I can do some little hatch lines if I think it needs to go a little darker, a little grayer there. You can hatch through that. You can add some hatching until it's pretty much the way you want it. Again, if it's really super light, you kind of got to pick and choose. What do I put in there? What can I leave in? What can I leave out? And if you want really, really light edges, barely touch your pen on the paper, and you'll get these uber light little lines. So all those little feathers that are way back there, you can just have these little lines kind of hanging out up there, not really attached to anything. And they'll give that sense that there's long, soft feathers kind of coming out. Very, very soft. When you're doing the texture of the feathers on the wings, they're just these little scallops, but you want to keep them very light. And just wherever it's the darkest, you want to put those in there. And you can use little hatched lines. You can use just little thin lines that give that illusion that they're connected, but they're really not connected. They're just little dots, little lines that kind of connect there or feel like they're connected. And if you're very, very lightly touching it, you're going to get these broken lines. And that's what you want. Just where it's the darkest. And you put little dots and dashes in the patterns, and all of a sudden it's going to look like little feathers. Because your viewer is going to connect all those little dashes and dots to the pattern of the feathers. Keep it simple. Don't put in too much. When in doubt, leave it out. You can always come back in and add more. Again, I really want to get rid of the graphite as fast as I can because it bugs me. And I really like the broken edge. I like letting my imagination take over and fill in the spots that I've left out. It's okay to do that. Like I say, we can always come back in and add more. So don't be too bent on every little thing. Just what you feel like you need. If you need more, you can always come back in later. I'm going to kind of leave out this edge. I'm going to let the water define that edge. And so what I'm going to do is, as I do the water, just remember the water it's just lights and darks, little ripples. So you can bring out little lines like this just away from the edge of that bird. You can even do little meandering lines that just kind of say, well, there's water back there. And if you're barely touching the surface, you're going to get these little dashes and dots in that direction. And that's really all I want to do. I just want to do a couple little lines in there. Just say, look, there's some water up in there. And I'm just going to try to follow the direction that I can see those little spots of light and dark. And that defines the edge of that bird. I didn't draw an edge there at all. I'm just letting the light of the water define that edge. There is a shadow of the bird, and maybe I want to put that shadow in there really quick. Maybe I'm just going to go back and forth like this and put in that shadow. And I can add more or I can add less, depending on what I want to do. Right next to the bird is going to be darker. Cast shadow is always darker nearer the object, or it should be. And there might be some little highlights, some shines in there. You can just leave those out. But that's your water. I mean, piece of cake. Any of those other little ripples, you can put those in. And if you just go, it's kind of like doing the feathers. If you just go in the direction that those are, skip little edges and things, you got it. Some areas maybe you need to be a little thicker, a little darker than others. And you just look at your scrap and use that as a guide, as a reference. You're not really trying to copy it either, because as soon as this picture was taken, it moved. So nothing, nothing has to be perfect here. If I want that water to look like it kind of fades out in the background, maybe there's some mist in the background or something that often occurs on water, I just keep getting lighter and softer and less line as I go back. And then it just disappears in the background. Remember, as you get closer to you, the little lines get a little further apart. And you can just kind of scribble through them. And you can do the same thing as it gets closer to you. You just kind of fade them out. Less line. And somewhere in there, you need to leave a little space for your signature. I'm about ready to get rid of all the graphite on here. Everything is pretty much where I want it to be. All I need now is my darks. I can add more to it or less. Some more parallel line or some more scribble in there. Depends on how much darkness you want to put in there. And once you got the basic form of it and everything, you really can just kind of scribble through it as much as you feel like you need to. Little dots and dashes. Be a little spontaneous too. Sometimes what you feel is more right than what you think you should do. These little hatched lines that I'm doing here, if I go really quick on the kind of the side of it, I get these very thin little lines, and they create a nice value, a nice tone to it, without getting too much in the way of the texture. I am going to add a little bit of darkness to the back here, because if I've got all this water up here, I need to have the same thing over here. So it looks like it flows through it. So I'm going to add a little bit of that, scribbling back in here, and then just keep that up, going up. Also, where the water kind of comes out helps to define the edge of that bird right there. So I can take these lines and just come straight out from there. And that helps define it. I suppose if I paid a little bit more attention to where everything was, it would probably look a little bit better, a little more realistic. But sometimes you want to just hatch through it. You want to get through it and figure out the best way to do it as fast as you can. If I were outside and I were drawing this in real life, they were sitting there. Those swans are not standing still for you. So you want to draw as fast as you can. Even people, when I draw people, they'll say they're standing still, but they're not. They move slightly. So you want to get as much information as fast as you can. Hopefully that water's the easiest water you've ever drawn. Just shapes of dark and light. If you get the direction, the pattern right, it's going to look good. So the last thing you want to do on this is sign it. Make sure that your signature's there. Good place to sign it is somewhere towards the bottom, not right on the edge. I kind of left myself a little bit of space right there. So in that water is a good place to sign it. Well, I hope that you had a lovely time doing this and that you learned some things, that you were able to practice a little bit of your ink skills. You can take this as far as you want it to go. So, thanks for drawing with me. I hope you guys have a lovely day. And I hope somehow it's made your life a little bit better. Because art makes life better.